I discovered self-improvement on YouTube and in self-help books a couple years ago. And at first I thought that everything about it was magical. It was giving me all the keys to becoming the best version of myself. And I had the idea that if I was to design my life to be fully optimized for self-improvement, then I'd be able to reinvent myself fully in a couple of months. Just get in shape, build a business, and become financially free. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. There's a trap, a paradox you shouldn't fall into. And for months, I felt lost because of it. The problem lies in time, more precisely in the amount of time you spend consuming self-improvement. Because when you start watching those videos and read those books, your brain gets directly immersed into this kind of world and all those self-accomplished people that are promising you great things. Because if you put it simply, self-improvement is really more about teaching and awareness, sharing information that you can then use to reinvent parts of your life. Whether you're watching inspirational videos, reading like me self-help books, or listening to podcasts, the reality remains pretty much the same. You need to encode the information that the person is conveying and use it in order to change your life. You need to action it. That's the entire purpose of the game. But the problem is that self-improvement can only help you so much. It can provide you with the knowledge, the frameworks, but not the actual application. In other words, it can give you a sense of direction, but it would not and never do it for you. More importantly, exposing your brain to all this advice eventually will short circuit it because there's just too much information and not everything can be used. It's called an overload of information. You don't have enough time to engage in the process of change that each piece of advice demands. So you end up with all these ideas, all these frameworks, all these acts, all these lists of things to do, but you get stuck in the process because you're unable to put any of it into action. That's when you start feeling like me a couple months ago, that you're lacking willpower, that you don't have enough discipline, that you don't have enough motivation to do it, and that you're just a lazy person. When in reality, the problem is that this is just way too much for your brain to handle. And the quantity of information that your brain has stored through self-improvement is so great that you can't action it. And if you feel that way, it means that you're stuck into the self-improvement paradox that I call. When more self-improvement does not equate getting better anymore, you're just piling up information that's unused in the back of your mind. And then there's a way out of it. But first, we need to fully grasp the concept if we were to find a remedy. Imagine this. You're standing at the base of a vast mountain range. Everyone has promised you that if you just reach the summit, everything you're striving for is just waiting for you. But instead of committing to one trail, you're constantly switching paths every time you hear about a potentially easier and faster route to get there. Problem is that by constantly switching directions, you never get far enough to see tangible results or confirm that what you're doing is right. And the reality is that you would have likely have achieved far more if you were to just stick to one path, regardless of what other people were saying. Because if your goal is to eventually reach the peak, you need to commit to one path and stop being seduced by every new shiny alternative that comes your way. That's the hardest part. Because the truth is, there are many ways you could climb the mountain, but constantly rewriting your route is not one of them. And I'm convinced that it all comes down to anxiety. Our brains are easily overwhelmed. And the problem with self-improvement is that you can now go on social media, YouTube, whatever, internet, and expose yourself to hundreds of paths to the summit pretty much every day. So this is why it's a paradox, because something that is supposed to be helping you ends up paralyzing you. And you just get lost in the process. And to understand why you feel that way and how to escape the trap, there are two key concepts in psychology that we need to explore. You see, as humans in modern life, we've never had so many decisions to make, and it can trigger a lot of anxiety because our brains weren't designed to handle such an overwhelming amount of decision making every day. And after a long day, just try and make a difficult choice with various options, like, I don't know, finding a new job, for example. You'll quickly realize that it's extremely hard because your brain struggles to process all the information and all the possibilities that are out there. And you just end up feeling anxious and overwhelmed, postponing the decision and not end up finding a job. And that's what I believe is happening with self-improvement. The more self-improvement content we consume, the more perceived opportunities we have for improving our lives. But instead of gaining clarity, it creates frustration and self-deception because the abundance of advice makes it so hard for us to just choose and commit to one single route. Planning where you just feel stuck at the base of the mountain, unsure of which path to take. That's the first issue. You have too many options for where to begin. You could focus on improving your fitness, reading more books, limiting social media use, starting a meditation practice, all of those things, that plus learning any skill that you want. And all of these different trajectories are productive. But your brain's desire to do it all is exactly what will lead you to learn nothing. Because again, too many options and too little attention and energy to give is the recipe for disaster. Now, there's another reality to consider, and it's that your brain has a very finite capacity for attention. Because processing information requires focus and your working memory. And the problem with those is that those two things are very limited and they can be easily overwhelmed by the amount of information you're exposed to. Think of your brain, and by your brain I mean your focus, memory, attention, and everything, as a backpack you carry on your climbing journey. You know, there's only so much you can pack before it overflows, making it impossible to ascend because your backpack is just spilling open. And watching too much self-improvement content and really too much content in general will eventually lead you to what's called cognitive overload. So cognitive overload is the enemy because it's the thing which prevents you from taking actions and making progress. It's when the backpack becomes too heavy, filled with things you'll probably never actually use. And it only slows you down and makes the whole journey feel impossible. So what you need to do is to make sure that you're just carrying the essentials, not all the rest and the useless stuff that's just taking all the space. There are no secrets. There is no remedy. There is no secret ingredient. There's no magic bullet solution. And most of the journey involves repeating the basics over and over again until you master them. And for that, you need not to overwhelm yourself. So in a nutshell, you could probably watch half an hour of self-improvement content and gain the same benefits as if you had watched 5 hours of it. Because the more you consume, the more you overload your brain with information you can't use, which is exactly what's preventing you from thinking clearly. And if you're stuck right now, and if that's the reality of your situation, you feel like your brain is just contains too much information you can't choose, there are steps to take in order to escape from the self-improvement trap. The first thing that you have to understand is that less is more. The first thing that needs to be done is some cleaning in your habits. If you feel stuck, you probably need to do less. You need to consume less. You need to do fewer things. You need to set yourself fewer goals and focus on what's truly important. Let's say you promised yourself that you change your physique, and for you at the moment, that's the priority. Like nothing else is. It's just you have to focus on getting in shape. Sure, you still have your job, your responsibilities, bills to pay. But in your mind, besides the normal life that you're leading, the normal activities in your life that you're leading, you should have only one added priority, which in that case should be getting in shape. Because there are only 24 hours in a day, and adding just one more habit to your list is already more than enough when you're just starting out. That's why you need to stay away from the idea of reinventing yourself, because that's just not going to happen. So make a decision. You have to pick one thing that's most important for you at the moment. Pick that thing and then put everything on to waiting list. Whether it's learning that new skill for your job or building a new business, getting in shape. That's usually what comes up when I talk to my clients. But in order for that to happen, you need again to consume less content, and not just self-improvement content, but content in general. Whether it's social media, TV, books, whatever it is, you need to stop overloading your brain with information that you cannot digest right now. And this is tricky because the more self-improvement you consume, the more you discover what needs to be done, and the more tempted you are to just keep watching and then piling up the information because you might need it later after all. And I fell for that trap when I started consuming self-improvement and business content. So I put the idea in my mind that I needed to be financially secure as soon as possible. And The only way to do that is to create your own business, which is solid advice on paper. Then I went all in on researching the different business types and how to generate leads, how to start an SMMA, pretty much everything. And I went deep into the rabbit hole, and it gave me crippling anxiety for weeks. I felt like that after seeing those videos and those self-improvement, advices about making $10,000 in the next 30 days or so, I had to do it. And if I couldn't do it, it means that I was too lazy, incapable, and not disciplined. Meanwhile, creating a business, starting from scratch, getting in shape, doesn't happen overnight when you don't have any experience. At the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is that you set goals for yourself and that you take action towards those goals on a daily basis. But for that to happen, the key to focus on is discipline, because motivation alone won't get you there. The good news is that discipline on paper is actually easy to build. All you need to do is set a realistic goal and then commit to it and just do it. And the biggest mistake most people make is that they start with a goal that's not aligned with where they're currently at in their journey. I see it all the time with my coaching clients. If you've never been to the gym and you struggle with simply showing up, don't start with the goal of going to the gym every day. That's as simple as that. Start small. Start with something that's realistic considering your schedule. So like 2 or 3 times per week. And then once you stick to it, then you gradually increase the frequency from there. The bad news is that you probably already know all of this. And if that's the case, what's missing is just a primer. You need ignition. You need to start as soon as possible. Because the more you dwell on the idea without acting on it, the more abstract and unattainable it becomes for your brain. And you might just convince yourself that you simply don't have enough time to get back in shape because of your job, your life, the things that are happening at the moment. And the last thing on our list is to revisit what we started the video with, which is time. Time is a psychological and abstract concept that you can actually use to your advantage. But in order to do that, you need to reframe your perspective on it. Most of us want to reach the end faster than what it realistically takes. We focus on getting results as quickly as possible, which completely distorts our perception of time. And in a world where everything is promised to you instantly on social media and the internet in general, a little time reframing is really essential. You need to stretch out your time horizon. You need to accept that it's probably going to take much more time than you initially thought it would take. And most of us, myself included, we underestimate the investment that true achievement requires. We want it to take less time, but by thinking this way, we also underestimate the effort needed to get there, which only makes the path harder. And eventually you'll realize that if you really want that, if you really want to get to the summit, if you want to get to the peak of the mountain, you will need to double down on your effort. And as always, I hope this helps. Trust the process.